how you are, where are you coming from?
Sure, Goodwin Gold. Created Gold Capital 2005. Before that, I was investing in the U.S. in 95 to 2003. We're a private equity fund management company with about $35 billion US of asset under management across various strategies, various funds in be it retail, residential, logistics, data center, hospitality, residential, and 15 offices in 10 countries. So that's what we do. And I think you mentioned, maybe talk a little bit about Asia and then why our interest in Turkey also. So from Asia, obviously, right now, the world is sitting in a very interesting place with this highly uncomfortable, symbiotic, interdependent relationship between US and China. Uncomfortable dance partner, but they need each other. So the world is also bifurcating into a China-centric, China friends-centric world, and then US and US friends-centric world. Because of that, many of our investors, the large sovereign wealth funds, actually increasingly looking at us to say, now with the true bifurcation, they may very well have to allocate capital into a two ecosystem, essentially, for diversification. And I think Turkey actually sits in a very interesting spot. In fact, I remember during the pandemic, I look at what Turkish Airlines did with the new airport that you have here. It truly became a bridge from Asia to Europe, and Europe to Asia, and then obviously include Middle East and include parts of Africa. And when this bridge happened with your very well-run Turkish Airlines, I actually can't remember the last time I keep flying back to Asia through Istanbul almost every time when I have to connect from Europe back into, and in some cases from the US actually back into Asia through Istanbul. So I think that makes Istanbul an incredible bridge, which you historically have always served between Asia and Europe, increasingly so with far greater distance. And because of this bridge and the role you can play in this unstable world, I think it makes for a pretty interesting place for us to try to learn. And hopefully our first partnership with the Kalyan Group will shine some light and help us, and for some of you here to help guide us into how do we actually allocate and look to invest more in this country.
Thank you very much for your fine, kind words. And I would like to go on with Mr. Jamal Majid Halfan Bintenia, coming from MR Properties. And with your vast knowledge in the industry, in the real estate, not only in the real estate, but also transportation with the ports before. So can you please introduce yourself, Mr. Jamal?
Jamal Bintania, I'm the chairman of MR Property. MR Property is, today when I sit as a chairman, is the largest real estate developer outside China. It's a real estate giant. We go for the next product that we deliver to our customers, from real estate development to malls to hospitality and other entertainment businesses. Earlier, I was the vice chairman of GYODER. It's a global company that's spread over the world. We used to operate 67 ports around the world, including a port in Istanbul, in Iran. And we yet to see more developments taking place in Turkey. Turkey is a great economy. We have certain focuses around the world, of which Istanbul is one of it. As you know, the world is classified in hubs and super hub. Istanbul, I believe, is a super hub. As my colleague mentioned earlier about the center point where the east, west, north, south meets. Possibly Istanbul plays a great role into this business today. Earlier in my life, I spent a lot of time in Africa, and connection in Africa is not difficult to Europe or to the Middle East. Although Emirates has played a major role into connecting Asia and Europe via Dubai, nevertheless, I've seen a greater emphasis and connection. Wherever I go, I see Turkish Airlines connecting the whole of Africa into Istanbul and to the west or east. I believe we're in front of great opportunities in Turkey, and we have to see more and more investors to look for a certain product, of which MR has done a great job to deliver a sound product to its customers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jamal. And finally, last but not least, of course, Mr. Rolf Buch, coming from Germany, from Vonovia. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Rolf Buch. I'm CEO of Vonovia. Vonovia is actually probably a company with more than 550,000 apartments, so this makes us probably the biggest landlord in the Western world. I don't know about China, so but in the Western world, and we are, by the way, also the biggest developer of residential, but we are focused on residential.
Thank you very much. Now that we all know the esteemed panelists, I would like to continue with Mr. Goodwin. Goodwin, you are coming from the money side of the real estate and the far away, but also investing in many regions as well. So, starting from what you started already, from your present situation of the real estate industry in the Far East, how would you look at our market? How would you see Turkey from outside as a Far Easterner?
I do think, obviously, the headline news scares people, right? The headline news always the hyperinflation, very high interest rate, real estate, we need debt. We need support of debt to do real estate projects. So what I do like is the headlines makes it look scary. But if you peel off the layer a little bit and try to understand it, then you actually look at it, it's not as scary as you thought. After all, Istanbul by itself is 20 million people. Your infrastructure is fantastic, although traffic jam is a bit of an issue. So from the attractiveness to tourism, people passing through in transit, and Turkish businessmen are savvy and welcoming. So I do think it's quite attractive. And the fact that a lot of the Asian capital, especially Chinese capital, can no longer really go to US, or US is so hostile to Chinese investment company, I think Turkey actually is going to become a great discovery, provided we get the right local partners here to help us, to guide us, to look at the right opportunity, and political alliances are done in a welcoming way, where I do think you have actually attract quite a bit of Chinese capital to come if the country opens it.
We say inshallah to that, God willing, we look forward. And I can move on from Mr. Jamal, because as MR, you already invested in Turkey. I was a very proud, humble servant for your company when we were doing the MR Square on the Asian side of Istanbul, and another residential development from beforehand. And here, if you can kindly, give us your side of the things, your experience on how to make an iconic city, because MR has been an influential player in the local market in Dubai and surrounding countries as well, to create the difference, to attract more foreign direct investment into a city like Dubai. How would you describe the situation, if you can give us your experience, please?
Our experience starts from Dubai, that we have created landmarks for the city. I mean, today we dominate Dubai skyline, and we will continue to do so. If you visit Dubai, you will see our new civilization that has been created there. To start with our experience in Dubai, we have built the iconic Burj Khalifa, the tallest tower in the world. And we did not stop at that point, but we created, we were looking at creating a city inside the city. We created the iconic tower, which is Burj Khalifa, surrounded by the most visited mall in the world, which is the Mall of Dubai. We have the footfall in Dubai Mall today is 330,000 visitors. We normally hit the 90 million, the 95 million mark before COVID and after COVID. We created something called the lifestyle promise in Dubai. We did not stop at creating the iconic building, neither we stopped at the mall, but also we went for the largest fountain in the world, just to bring some kind of attraction and a lifestyle to the visitors. We had to capitalize on our achievement in Dubai, and we thought that we should have a global footprint. As I mentioned earlier, this hubs versus the super hub, I mean, you cannot ignore Hong Kong, you cannot ignore Singapore, you cannot ignore Istanbul, you cannot ignore, of course, Dubai. But we yet to look into certain opportunities at a global level. Istanbul is one of our recent investment that we did. We've gone for the mix again, not to replicate what's in Dubai, because Turkey, as a great economy, has its own culture, feature, but we delivered what satisfies the customer's requirement in Turkey. We developed the commercial, the housing, we have the 5-star hotel, the Address Hotel, and also Amal Square, where the mall is.
Thank you. Yes, please go ahead, Mr. Jamal. And the hotel, the hospitality as well.
Yes.
That hopefully you will be even growing your investments into other parts of Turkey. What do you say?
That's for sure. I mean, we've seen this summer that South Turkey has boomed ever.
Yes.
And this brings the value again to the real estate and the hospitality one more time to the market. Some skeptic views for the last 5 years about Turkey's real estate investors, but we have seen the appreciation which has bounced back strongly last year and this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jamal. Mr. Bouk, you are coming from one of the strongest economies in the world, if not the strongest in Europe, and of course your background on the housing side, on the residential side, and today is an important day for us, for Turkey, as our president in the morning opening speech, he mentioned that there is this groundbreaking ceremony today in Ankara, and based on the theme of our conference here, that we are trying to draw a new route for the real estate industry altogether, considering the 40, the technology, the nature, the design, and the society, and your areas of activity are mostly on the social side as well. How would you approach us? How would you transfer a little bit of your experience, if you may, and we can learn from you today?
So yes, you know, Germany after the Second World War had to be rebuilt, and we have chosen in Germany, this was probably the only alternative, there was no capital left, to rebuild actually the country by state-owned companies. So 50% of the people in Germany living are still tenant. So we are a real tenant nation. And because we have introduced in this period very well legislation for rental protection, it doesn't make sense to become an owner. So we are looking actually back on 40 years of experience of tenant and landlords which are renting out apartments. But it's not the amateur landlords, which we sometimes call them, but it's the real professional landlords like Vonovia. And I think this is a great solution, especially for the big cities. We also see in Germany, we don't have one mega city like Istanbul, but we have a lot of bigger cities in Germany. And we see that more and more people are moving into the cities. And to live in a city, it is very difficult, even for a middle-class person, to own an apartment. So we have experienced, what you probably also experience here in Turkey, is that you have to provide sufficient affordable apartments. So we are not talking about social apartments, we are talking about apartments for the middle class. And what we have learned is that you have to mix. So it's a big mistake to have a block only for social housing and then another for the middle class housing. So the most important is, and this is one of our biggest jobs we have to do, to get a mixture of richer people, normal income people, and some even people who get welfare. And to put them together in a quartier and to have a lively quartier. And this is also linked in our social understanding of the country. So this is one very important thing, and if I would allow me to advise you, I think to go a program to just build housings only for social housing will end up in a disaster. And I can tell you, we have made the same mistake. In the 70s, we have built actually in front of the cities, new cities, with a lot of social housing. The big company was called Neue Heimat. They went bankrupt in '82, so nothing to repeat. But we are still suffering from these mega cities because in the beginning it was attractive. But then because it's only social housing, the situation gets unstable. And that's why I think if you're building now a program for rental apartments, I think the experience what we have made is probably helpful to design the future. And then of course the second big topic, which I think will be also cannot be ignored here, is that in Germany, and I think it's the same here, 40% of the CO2 emissions are created by housing or by real estate, which the majority of real estate is housing. So this means that actually we are on a big pressure at the moment to reduce CO2 emissions. You know that the target in Germany is to be CO2 neutral by 45, which is a challenge, which is a technical challenge, which is a challenge of you need a lot of capital to be invested. And then there is a third challenge in Germany, which is not the Turkish challenge. We are an aging population, so we get a lot of people which will be retired in the next 10 years, including myself. So my generation will go out of work, but we don't want to die if we are out of work. We still want to live, so we are not emptying apartments. And the problem is that the generation who will replace us is only 1/4 of the generation who is moving out of the job. So I think you have probably seen that there are still some debates in Germany about refugees, but it is clear that this country needs to have a lot of immigration. I think like in the 70s, where people from Turkey and Italy were coming to Germany, we will see the next wave coming in the next years, which brings, of course, a lot of challenges for the housing sector, because all these people need to have nice apartments, because they probably will not go to buy apartments. So a huge challenge, and I think there is a huge chance. I know that in this plenum, a lot of construction companies are sitting. We have no big German construction company left because of some bad decisions in the past. So I think for Turkey, it's a great market, and I would advise you to invest a little bit more to get a part of this market, because this will be enormous.
Thank you very much for your advice. And as you might know, our Turkish construction companies, after the Chinese ones actually, they became the second in the world in terms of expansion, in terms of growth. And thanks for the advice, because we are also witnessing in the Central European countries that the city center rejuvenation is also moving ahead. But today, from morning until now, we have been discussing on some new approaches on how to use better design, on how to use technology in favor of the human, because if we can put the human at the center to use the moments, it will be great. Mr. Jamal, I would like to pass on to you, because from that we can move on to this, because Dubai is giving to the world a new experience now, that since January 1st, Dubai is using 2.5 days of weekend. Is that correct? How do you see that? I mean, will it change the lifestyle? Because that will impact definitely after the pandemic, the working from distance, co-working, maybe introducing some co-living, not only for the student housing, but also senior citizens, as Mr. Brook mentioned, that the life expectancy is growing. Soon, I believe, in Switzerland, they will find the vaccine for living more than 100 years. I'm 65 years old, I'm not considering myself old anymore. I am saying that I'm moving towards my maturity, and 85 plus will be the old age. So how do you see the effects of these changes in Dubai, living way, the new lifestyle? Can you comment on that, please?
Before they moved to 4.5 day working with the 2.5 days weekend, it has influenced the economy a bit. On the spending, on enjoying a longer weekend, that has influenced certain sectors in the city. Beyond that, it is they moved. The fact is that they moved toward the international timing, which is Saturday, Sunday, but
Yes.
they kept Friday as a half day, working up to noon time, and it's an opportunity for the population to enjoy more time with their families. I mean, we have seen a greater influence on the hotel. We have seen also influence on the F&B, especially in the malls, etc., where we noticed an increase. But I mean, it may attract also the international investor to consider such an environment to work with. Because Dubai, beyond that, it's I mean, a city that has been built with a great superstructure and infrastructure. And they worked before in the free zone,
Yes.
long time back.
Yes, I know.
Most of the people they want, those days, 30 days, most of the people they want to see the fax machine and telecom before the office at that time. What I'm saying, that Dubai all the time is taking 2-3 steps ahead.
Yes.
To keep everything ready for the future. Telecom that takes too long to install, they made it readily available. They have built a super airport, accommodating over 100 million passengers. They created a huge port surrounded by a huge free zone. I mean, when you ask yourself all this, I mean, the sheer size of this development, and the road network, the interchange, etc., it happened only for the last 10-15 years. But we don't have that. I mean, like what we see in other places, that to see the immediate charging on the infrastructure. But we really saw the real return on this infrastructure now. We are surrounded by 2 billion population, right from East Africa, India, Pakistan, Iran, Africa. But the most efficient city that sits in the 2 hours radius is Dubai. To put all into perspective, there is, I mean, it has become very much feasible today that we see families living in Dubai while the business owner in India, but with the recent telecommunication, as we see today, there is no difference why you cannot operate for India, Pakistan, Iran, and the rest, while you are situated in Dubai. Great infrastructure, well-connected airport. I mean, the airport connection plays a major role into the investment. Because you want to be in and out, you want to be in London, New York, Australia, all with direct flights, regardless of time, morning time. We do operate the 24-hour system. And we really benefited from such an investment in the infrastructure, and also the deregulation of the old regulation that has restricted this type of investment to come to Dubai.
And just one small question to finish up. Would you advise this audience, even to those who could not come to visit Dubai in the Expo 2020, which was delayed because of the pandemic, to see what you are doing even after the Expo? How you are making good use of that investment for the future in terms of that? Would you recommend that?
Highly recommended, because the Dubai government decided to keep Expo open.
District Dubai.
District 2020 is still open, with some also of the pavilions still operating.
Fantastic infrastructure.
That's right.
Thank you very much. Now, Gudwin, if I come back to you, because we started with the social, we started how the iconic city is approaching, because we were discussing with you about the return on investments. And sometimes the return on investments for social and sustainable, because two of the 40s are on the sustainability side and on the society side. And from your investments, how you are approaching, maybe you would like to show even your beautiful slides in that perspective.
Sure. maybe I just want to share a lesson that I've learned. I think could be quite applicable, especially now that you're thinking about a massive social housing program. But in Hong Kong, a little bit of context, under the British government, they actually built a lot of these housing estates. They're generally 10 to 20 towers, monolithic towers, all feed into the community shopping centers that actually feed into a subway system or buses or public transportation to serve the underprivileged class. Right, so these are government subsidized housing. In fact, some of the pictures, maybe you can, this is really...
Enjoy the music. It's coming now.
But I can maybe, I'll describe it. So basically, what we did, we actually went and bought 27 of these shopping centers. They were quite in bad shape because the government over the years have privatized them. When we looked at it, we said, how do we actually generate hope back in these communities? So the counterintuitive thing, what we did, many of these community malls actually have a rooftop that are sports courts. Right? So on the roof, they actually are playground for kids. But over the years, because they don't charge fees, the privatized developers decided they will lock them up, let the nets be gone, and basketball nets and tennis courts are gone, the paints are peeling. So it's quite a depressing look when you're a resident looking down at these playgrounds where your kids can't even play. So the first thing we did, we actually brought in a young design team who became designer but grew up in these housing communities. We basically told them we actually want to spend money to fix up these sports courts. And they looked at us, they were like, why would a private equity firm for a profit company do this? Because my thesis was, how do we generate hope for these kids and how do we bring love back to this community? And the way is show them that we actually care about them. These 27 malls serve 1.1 million people in Hong Kong. So what we did, after we fixed up the first couple of courts, I told my team, once we do a couple of the courts, we will get Hong Kong Corporation to actually help us fix up these courts and let them be sponsored, right, to share the love. So that's what we did. After the first couple of them, we actually won a Global URI award for this thing. I was laughing, I think a $6 million project beat a $5 billion project in the URI Global Award. So when we did the first few, we got a lot of accolades, a lot of press, and then Nike started coming, Red Bull started coming, Coca-Cola started coming and said they would help us fix these courts. So once we got that movement going, the second idea I always thought is to generate hope, you need community spirit, right? You need people to feel, in these residents to feel that people actually care about us. So we actually then formed under 14 basketball teams, volleyball teams, using sports to generate hope. And then we partnered with an NGO to create a basketball league among these 27 communities so that they have their home team. So that home and away basketball in the afternoon. And then we got the vendors involved. Some of these F&B operators say, for the winning team, we would love to give them free food. And said, you don't have to give them free food, but we'll subsidize it. You give the free food to the kids with good grades and winning the basketball, so the community won, and then we will actually take that out of your rent, so you're not subsidizing it. But then they are subsidizing it themselves. So this became a bit of a movement to now, we were able to actually, I was twisting my friends' arms at UBS, Goldman Sachs to help sponsor. And now we actually are replacing the sponsorship of these teams with grassroots, local Hong Kong entrepreneurial companies where the kids can actually point to, my sponsor used to grow up in this community, now he has become a very successful businessman with his business in China. And then that's how we're trying to use sports to generate hope. And how does this come back into, I always say business, even philanthropy, even social responsibility needs to be sustainable. To be sustainable, in this case, yes, we spend money seemingly without return on investment, or ROE. But in hindsight, because the product become well loved by the community, the kids started spending more time there, the grandparents spend more time there, so more time in the mall, more time in the restaurants, they're supporting their own vendors, their own community, their own neighbors. Then more turnover, more foot traffic, automatically we tell the tenants, we're not charging you a higher base rent, we're just asking for the same turnover rent. If we give you more revenue, you're paying us 11 to 12% of your turnover, and you keep the rest of 88%. And so this has actually worked really well, down to where many of the Hong Kong corporates are now asking to use our courts for the sports day. And we also tell them, you don't have to pay, but all your purchases have to be through the mall for the local vendor to generate more turnover.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the good example. And now that we are having something like 5 minutes left for our session, Maybe your last word starting from you, Mr. Buch, maybe a little bit emphasis on the sustainability and how would you advise us?
Yeah, so I think I have talked about before about the CO2 reduction, and it's actually two. One is what is emission in the existing buildings, and the second, of course, is probably the more important question: how we do construct buildings without generating additional CO2, which means actually that we have to discuss construction material. But for Vonovia, it's not only the E which is important, but it's the S which is important, because as you are providing housing, I'm always joking saying if we are doing big mistakes, the mayor will not be re-elected. So as a landlord, as a big landlord, we have a real impact on the stability of the society. So the ability to provide a stable environment for our customers, our tenants, is very important. So to make sure that you have processes in place that they don't lose their apartment, even if they cannot pay the rent temporarily. These are also things where for us it's very much on the focus. And also I and all my colleagues on the board are measured by customer satisfaction. So we are measuring regularly how satisfied our tenants are, and we are getting paid more or less. And this is probably something very normal if you're a telco operator and a consumer product, but it's probably less normal for a real estate manager.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jamal, any final message for us to send the audience to remember you from this session?
Talking about the sustainability.
Yes.
We looked at the sustainability because we do construct a lot. It was last year when we asked ourselves. I mean, towers after towers. Now we have about 60 towers under construction. And the development will continue. But the main question which we have asked, I mean, the construction and real estate development, it comes with a low tech. And the development in that sector do become slow. We would like to replace the cement with different environmental friendly, that's sustainable. We have to look again at the steel alternatives. We have engaged our management with the major universities around the world, including some consultants, to give us a real advice for a paradigm shift in the construction.
Yes.
At this moment, most of the sustainability, which becomes the environmental friendly to start with, aiming that we will have alternative products to whatever we use for these towers and the mass production of the social housing. We yet to see the great news from whoever we have invested.
Thank you so much. And we started with you, we finish with you. Your last comments for us, a message to all of the audience.
I think we should always see ourselves, whether we're a developer, investor, or building owner, to be in the consumer product business, right? We're always in the consumer product business. So any development we do, whether these days it's about the ESG principle, I think it's important that the product we're trying to create becomes relevant to the neighborhood, relevant to the city, and even when it comes to sustainability, right? Sometimes, I think too often, we write off a building saying it's obsolete too early. And actually, the amount of concrete waste that goes into landfill, it's part of the carbon problem also. So how do we actually recycle buildings better? One, reusing, especially some of these heritage buildings that has a lot of history, that patina of time we can never replace. And then also in the future, design new buildings where they can be more like Lego blocks, and they can be disassembled, replaced, reused in more efficient way at home.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking my dear panelists today for sharing their views, their experiences. Thank you very much to all of you.